All right. This is the Condescending Theory Nerds podcast, and I am leading, even though I'm the co-host, Will,
Yeah.
and you're Piper.
Yes.
Awesome. So I guess one of the first things before we go into the topic is introductions.
Right.
So Piper, who exactly are you?
Yeah. I'm Piper. I'm a trans woman. Write about politics and social science. I do videos here on YouTube. You're watching on the channel that I do videos on, so a lot of the people that are watching are probably familiar with me. But yeah, that's more or less who I am. So.
Oh, I guess I'm a little bit less familiar. I'm walking in like I own the place, but
Yeah.
I'm Will. I'm a Marxist humanist thinker, I guess. I associate with News and Letters Committee, and I pretty much just read and trying to write for the website, even though I just started.
Right.
Pretty much that's pretty much it.
Right.
So introductions are good. So
Yeah.
I guess that we can talk about what's currently going on these days. And I feel like one of the biggest ones is the disaster that is the Biden presidency as of, as it's going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite part about that is the opening up of a Trump detention center. Because Biden lifted restrictions on unaccompanied minors. And so now a bunch of unaccompanied minors are flooding in. And the only thing they can think to do with them, because, putting them with their friends and family is not an option. They need to be put in a cage somewhere. So, what they're doing with them is they're just herding them into more detention facilities, including this one that Biden just opened up from the Trump era. He opened it back up and he's herding them into it. A lot of the rhetoric from the Biden administration is basically, and from the nonprofit that's organizing this, even though that's kind of a joke because there's a lot of good money to be made in this camp, but from the nonprofit that's organizing this and the Biden administration, the rhetoric is, oh well, it's going to be so nice. It's going to be the Ritz of child detention centers, basically. And the thing that I found interesting that kind of dawned on me the other day is we went from putting unaccompanied minors into prisons to putting unaccompanied minors into prisons. So, that I feel like I think that as the leftists who, for whatever reason, thought it was important to vote for Biden, I think that that really represents harm being reduced, as they said before the election. So,
yeah, one of the biggest things in my mind, since you pretty much explained what's going on right now, I guess I can only add that the answer to the problem that we have right now, I'm sure that a lot of these blue check marks, these bread tube types, left of center, their answer to this problem is probably going to be, well, we need to move Biden left, or we need to have a maybe a more of a DSA majority, or a more pragmatic approach. But at the end of the day, this is what got them in this mess in the first place.
right.
The only answer to this problem is a complete change in the mode of production that we have.
Right.
This is just an outcome of the capitalist world system, going through its laws of motion.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and other than the basically the concentration camps for kids. We also got acts of violence going on, in I believe Syria.
Right.
Like 2 to 3 civilians were killed in that bombing.
Oh, right.
Yeah. A little bit, almost more than actual, soldiers that they were intending to kill, which was little to none. Human life, regardless, should not be destroyed like that over, a petty state war.
Yeah, is that the one where like the Biden defensists are like their rhetoric about that was, oh, it was targeting terrorists. It wasn't targeting innocent people, so it's fine.
Which I don't. It's not a defense of terrorism or whatever you want to like lay blame to. It's a critique of the strategy that so-called people on the left who either play defense for or ignore, and it is also a criticism of our capitalist bureaucrats who are getting worse every year. Like every presidency, they are getting worse and worse to the point to where they just don't know what the fuck they're doing. Pretty much, if you remember, if you paid attention at all, a lot of news concerning the election at the time was from Twitter. There is no like on the ground journalism being done in a lot of the. I'm not saying that there isn't any, but a lot of it comes from Twitter. Just like which is like it's kind of concerning. Not to mention, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like it's something. So I think like the philosophical issue of epistemology plays a lot into how people get their news, especially in the so-called information age. So there's something I like to call Facebook or Twitter epistemology, where essentially people get all their understanding of current events and nascent facts from memes on Facebook, contextless videos on Facebook, contextless tweets on Twitter, contextless videos on Twitter. And of course, there's no, editorial, there's no journalistic qualifications for any of this. There's no actual checks on any of the information to make sure that it's accurate. So it's pretty much this kind of unfiltered stream of whatever garbage someone wants to use to back up their preconceived narratives.
It's really much this this post-truth kind of like world we're living in right now, where anyone can just say anything and people uncritically look at it. And I'm not advocating for censorship. What I'm advocating, or I believe what you were advocating earlier, is basic critical thinking skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Which a part of what I think left radicals today should be doing is offering not only questions but answers to questions and promoting critical thinking skills.
Right. Yeah.
But the reason why I think that that's a good thing to bring up is that you brought it up before, but a lot of especially in the internet sphere, you have a lot of detached, like bread tubers, because they're pretty much the popular ones on the internet,
right?
Who fall into this pit of like partisanship for the Democratic Party,
right?
Who that they don't see that there's another option that isn't just the Republican Party, but to oppose the value producing system itself.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I don't understand why it has to be this way. I don't understand why these these core concepts of not only in my mind anarchism or Marxism are being opposed for this like weird left centrism politics.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's weird because like it's symptomatic of the history of the left in this country, which has been like sucked into the orbit of the Democratic Party since the migration of black people to urban areas to get away from Jim Crow persecution in the South, and that led to the Democratic Party orienting themselves as the party of the people, quote unquote. And since then, the Democratic Party has been very successful at making all left progressive politics orbit around them.
Yeah, the Democratic Party's been doing this. Actually, as a matter of fact, it even goes before that. The Democratic Party, what makes it sort of special compared to the Republican Party is that it's not special. What I mean by that is that it's always integrated these movements and or other parties within its sphere. It's integrated Stalinists, it's integrated pro-segregationists, Dixiecrats, agricultural populists, the New Left. Like it has a history of doing this, and this is why history is important to know, because if you knew this history, you wouldn't be having a partisan position in defending Biden.
Yeah.
Biden himself, not even Biden, just recently, we've had several Democrats who opposed a minimum wage increase just to $15 an hour.
Yeah, Biden essentially said, well, I'm going to work hard to get you the stimulus that's been promised since, I don't know, what was it, December?
Yeah,
hasn't, I think it just actually got put through. I think it's the headline I saw. Biden said basically, we're going to work on getting you this stimulus, which again, he himself went, he cut down his original promise for how big that was going to be. But he said, oh yeah, we're going to get you this stimulus, this reduced stimulus that you've been waiting on, for 8,000 years. But minimum wage, $15 an hour, that's kind of, we're gonna have to put that off the table. We gotta work on the stimulus, basically.
From what I've heard, and I think I read this from Financial Times, is that the stimulus, how it's going to work is we are not getting a full check. Not only is it not the $1,400 check that we were promised, as opposed to the other check we were promised, we are now getting $300 every week to a certain date. Now, I don't even know if they're gonna follow through with this. It has yet to be seen because it's not going through until the 25th of this month.
I mean, the funny thing is, in the liberal media, from what I've noticed, it's every week since the election, they've been doing this thing where they, on the morning news, they go, oh, Biden's putting through the stimulus, but they're doing that every week because every week he doesn't actually put through the stimulus. Every week it's just a false start.
Because a lot of my coworkers, they did that because we need it. We need the stimulus. It's not that I get disappointed when the stimulus gets canceled and has to be debated over more. Not because I believe that the welfare state can save me. It's just that I have to rely on the welfare state due to the fact. I guess we'll go into that too, because that's another big fucking thing that happened recently, to me at least. That we have people dying every month to COVID still, and the media is treating it as if it's not a big deal. As if it's passed over. Even people in office are treating it like that. Texas is opening full sail soon, if not already.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. What the governor of Texas said something recently. Like he said something in defense of that. I forget what he said, but he's to my memory he was like, actually you probably know better since you live in Texas, so I'll let you speak on that.
Well, no. I actually don't. I know what you're referring to. I just can't remember
what
he said. But other than that, alongside this COVID thing, I think like one of the biggest thing that I want to talk about right now that we talk about our bureaucracy that's useless is the meltdown, or should I say the lack of a meltdown of the snowstorm that happened in Texas recently.
Right.
Now, I went. I live in Texas, and this snowstorm affected a lot of people, and I can't tell you how unprepared, how inefficient, and how embarrassing and devastating it was. I've never experienced a snowstorm like that in my life. I've never experienced a snowstorm.
Yeah.
Car wrecks, like tens to like about 10 to 50 people got in a car wreck in my town alone, and that weren't prepared and got hurt. Not only that, but food was in low stock, which goes to show how efficient the capitalist system is.
Yeah.
Electricity around Texas was cut off. Water supply was shut off or unusable. So we had to be on to boil our water alert for weeks. And more than 50 people died to the cold. I don't even
wow.
More than 50. Like
wow.
In the technology that we have.
Yeah, you don't expect that to happen in a first world country, especially the United States.
And what makes it even worse is that after all that, a lot of jobs, including mine, which made me quit my job, is at that whole week we couldn't go to work, and especially in my industry, the warehouse distribution. We weren't paid that week.
Wow.
We weren't paid at all. And I don't have people need that money to survive in this climate.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's insane, and we were expected to, all of us, to go on with our lives as if nothing happened. And I got to talk to a coworker of mine who said that he's going to be kicked out of his apartment. He can't.
Yeah.
He can't keep putting off rent, and they fucked us. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And after after all of that, all we've gotten is either people in office in Texas being condescending, or people in these lib states who say well, they deserve it. They voted Republican.
Yeah.
Which is do you not care for your fellow man? Come on.
Well, you see, if as long as a state goes red on the electoral map, it doesn't matter the human suffering that takes place there, right? It's just it's a partisan deal. There's not about human suffering. It's not about people trying to survive. It's about you voted the wrong way.
Yeah, and I don't know, how is COVID affecting your state?
So in New Jersey, we're not one of the the states that is very lenient. Our governor is actually pretty hard line, which I think is that's good for us because at least on one hand, because that prevents the spread. But on the other hand, that means that people in New Jersey, absent this, forever being pushed back stimulus, are definitely suffering because of the shutdowns because they're not in work. You know, I mean, you know, I know a bunch of people who are like kind of petite bourgeois. They own their own businesses, and their businesses are getting wiped out. So if that's what the petite bourgeois go through, imagine, you know, what the working class in this state in places like Trenton or Camden are going through, when they can't get work. You know, it's kind of, I'd say in this state, what you're getting is the kind of double-edged sword where even when you implement proper lockdown measures, because of the way capitalism operates, the lockdown measures bring forth an economic crisis because you need continual accumulation, and that puts people out of work and creates a bunch of human suffering, regardless of whether you're dealing with the pandemic or not.
Well, this economic crisis has been going on even before COVID. It just COVID, you know, it's just a lot of people right now, which isn't being covered at all. A lot of people right now are seeing the inherent like flaws within the state structure, or should I say like the way that we organize ourselves around this exploitative system, you know,
right?
Like, the point is for, you know, radicals such as, you know, me and you and, you know, probably whoever's listening, is that to show that it's not, you know, the state structure that is the problem. It is the thing that it's protecting. It is the mode of production. And due to this mode of production, you know, people aren't getting what they need. People aren't, able to live under these, you know, times of like crisis, for like, you know, COVID.
Right.
But I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about the local response to COVID here is that in my local area, when Cuomo, I'm pretty sure it's
I think
Cuomo. Yeah. I sometimes mix him up with I mix our governor up with the governor of New York for some reason. But yeah, so when Cuomo was implementing the lockdowns, you know, I think around Christmas, there's this like group of business owners, you know, they did a march, and, you know, they were basically advocating that, you know, there should be no shutdowns, you know, that's shutdowns, you know, we should just basically do nothing about the pandemic and let the at-risk people stay home, essentially. But everyone else gets to run around. And, you know, that's kind of, to me, emblematic of where business interests are. They, you know, they want to keep you working for them and getting sick so that they can, you know, so that they can do what they're forced to do by the world economy, which is keep accumulating.
From what I've heard, and when I mean heard, I mean the articles I read. I heard that there's a really big push in New York from lawmakers and people around to basically call for Cuomo to resign after his, you know, his poor answer to COVID, the sexual harassment allegations.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything over there that's more in depth, or?
I don't know. I haven't. That's actually the first I'm hearing about that. So I'll have to look into it and get back to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that I would like to talk about more current events going on right now, because there's definitely a ton that's going on.
Okay. Yeah. So by the way, so since I confused my governor with the governor of New York, I was actually talking about Murphy, not Cuomo. Cuomo is New York.
I heard you say Cuomo.
Yeah, I said Cuomo. I was trying to. I mixed them up a lot for some reason.
Damn.
So, but Murphy, it was who the guy I was talking about.
Oh, because
yeah. No, I did hear about some scandals with Cuomo though recently.
Yeah.
Peripherally.
But I feel like we could go on forever about what's going on right now, because there's definitely a lot. But I feel like we should go to the main topic, of this podcast is on the Vanguard slash party form of organization.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess to start off is a Vanguard party. A good definition is that a Vanguard party is a select few professional revolutionaries who are, theoretically elite, and are, well trained by the party to do certain, acts of, organized, protest, lead the workers, blah blah. I think that's a pretty good layman's definition.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure someone will correct me if that's the case, but that's sort of a general idea. And I feel like me and you have been really talking about this behind the scenes about the inherent flaws in the history of the Vanguard Party, due to certain discussions we've had with not only Stalinists but Trotskyists.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Not blowing up my Twitter feed at all, though. Yeah. But now, to say why are we discussing it is because I think that there's a lot of new radicals, young new radicals, or older, who their first they're probably their first introduction to radical thought, or I should say lack of radical thought, is probably Stalinism or Trotskyism.
Yeah.
Like this is definitely one of the most popular views on YouTube, which it is a fact that this is the place that most people will go for easy access for
right. Yeah.
For this type of stuff. And
I mean, if I could just add something.
Go ahead.
Just really quickly. I've been on Bread. Before it was called Bread 2, quote unquote. I've been on leftist YouTube for a long time. And I can tell you, definitely before there was any real community of anarchist content creators or any people of any other persuasion, there was a kind of community of Stalinist content creators. You had Jason Unruh. You had this other guy who's dead now. I forget what is John Doe. You had some other kid in Scotland. I think it was called Scottish Socialist or something. He was
Finnish Bolshevik.
Finnbull came a little later. Yeah, so before you even had people people even before people like LSR, and certainly before the bread tubers who aren't even anarchists, but certainly before any of that, you had actually Stalinists who kind of dominated.
What's kind of I still feel ashamed about this is that these people actually influenced me a lot early on when I was looking toward a radical form of thought.
Right.
But it was non-compete first, and then I became a Stalinist.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that is really drawing to these people is that they, for what they are, they do give you well, I guess we should stay on topic here. They offer you an easy explanation of, an explanation that's wrong of radical ideas or lack of radical ideas. And one of these ideas is the Vanguard. It is very much an easy answer to a very complex problem which still exists today.
Right.
But the problem is that historically, the Vanguard has been a failure.
Right.
And that's why we're discussing it today. Now, I guess we should open up with, the origins and history of the Vanguard Party.
Right.
And the origins you can debate, some say Blanqui or Lenin or Kautsky.
Right.
But for our purposes, I think, unless you disagree, we can definitely pinpoint the origins on Kautsky, due to the fact that Lenin took a lot and quoted Kautsky quite a bit when it came to his formation of the Vanguard.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good starting place.
Yeah. Now, this is all from the head, and I don't really have notes on this, but I will say that when Lenin, or when Kautsky was, developing, or not developing, but when the Second International was formed, and you had this big, massive organization, like one of the biggest worker, or like communist or social democrat, what do you even call it, like organizations in the world. This is big, and it was an actual force that to be reckoned with. And what's interesting about it is historically, it called itself Marxist. But what's funny is that you had two banners. You had one that was of Karl Marx on the left, and then the right, that was Lassalle.
Right.
So what's funny is, and I'm getting my sources from, primarily people like Cyril Smith, who wrote about, the Second International, or Donetskaya.
Right.
Or, or what's his name? Heinrich Grossman. That's his name.
Yeah.
Is that, Lassalle, or Marx was the theory man, and Lassalle was the organizational type.
Right.
Which is in contradiction to Critique of the Gotha program, which Marx did have something to say about that.
Right. Yeah.
And now, to avoid talking forever, Lassalle had a huge effect on the way that these early radicals organized themselves, and a lot of it had to do with a man named Karl Kautsky, who wrote this book called Road to Power, I believe, and a lot of it was this sort of proto-vanguardist type of organization, where it was the party that was supposed to teach the backwards workers of the radical science and stuff like that. That was that they needed people within the state power and stuff like that. And Lenin took this, but under the Tsar's rule, and wrote what is to be done. Right. Yeah, which is the Lenin's conception of the Vanguard. Yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, I think I'll say so. To give some people some background history, or at least give some people the basics of the history. So the first international was the first kind of ever international organization of associated socialists and workers. Marx was a big part of it. Bakunin was a big part of it, and they had a kind of historic fight,
like an actual fist fight.
Yeah. They suplexed each other, but yeah. But they had this kind of big falling out, and that kind of led to the internationals, kind of the first internationals, kind of not disillusion, but kind of fall from the fall from historical importance.
Yeah, fall from grace, if you would.
Yeah. And then what gave way to that was the Second International, which was who won. I don't think anybody won in that fight, but yeah, kind of everybody lost. But so anyways, that goes into the Second International, which was basically after Marx had gained control of the First International. Some of the ideas that he wrote about labor parties and labor unions were used to then construct the Second International, which was just an international organization of socialist parties. That's where the term social democracy comes from. Didn't used to mean Swedish welfare states. It used to mean or Nordic welfare states. It used to mean just Marxist socialist parties. And so that's the Second International that we're talking about. Kautsky became kind of the main theorist of it. In addition to Road to Power, which Will was talking about, there was also something called the Erfurt Program, which was written by Bebel, August Bebel, who was a big figure in the Second International, and then what do you call it? And then it was also written by Engels. And then Kautsky does this commentary on the Erfurt Program, which is longer than the Erfurt Program itself quite a bit, but that became really influential, was translated into a bunch of languages, his commentary on it. So what I will say is that the Second International's kind of model of centralist organizing, where you had the party, the Electoral Socialist Party, and its leadership at the top, kind of creating this kind of nationalistically centered, homogenized, force to confront kind of national politics, which then subordinated to it these labor unions that were attached to the party. And so from that, that is something that influences the Leninist Vanguard Party, which you can trace that back to What Is to Be Done in its most kind of developed form. And then Lenin kind of ditches those ideas during the revolution. And then
should we talk about the split?
Just let me finish this and then we'll go to that. But so Lenin ditches those ideas a little bit, and then, during the revolution, and then after the revolution, as a way of governing, those ideas kind of come back. But so in What Is to Be Done, Lenin directly quotes Kautsky, and he's talking about this idea of kind of social democratic tutelage of the workers, and that is what needs to happen in order for the workers to, quote unquote, and this is his infamous phrase, go beyond trade union consciousness. Now, it should be remembered that Lenin wasn't just kind of saying everything needs to be done by the intellectuals. He thought that the social democratic intellectuals as they existed were actually kind of tepid and not up to their historical task. So they needed to kind of reconnect with the workers and revitalize themselves into an actual revolutionary social democratic intelligentsia.
Now, when we there is some truth to that, though. Like, aside from the Vanguard, one of the biggest things for at least in my side of the park for Marxist humanists is that this split between the worker and the intellectual is of a big importance, because a lot of time you find that in these revolutions where vanguards are in charge, they end up becoming counter-revolutionary. They end up being disconnected from the working class itself. I just thought I just thought that that part of it I would say is pretty important to take away from.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of centralized national framework of the movement governed by the Socialist Party with subordinate trade unions, that was the kind of first major ingredient of vanguardism, Leninist Vanguard Party. And then the second major ingredient was populism, and it's the populist tendency of what's called Jacobinism. And so populism was the historical basis for Russian radicalism, Russian socialism. And within that tendency, because a lot of populism was made up of these intellectuals who thought it was their cross to bear to organize on the part of the peasantry, because of that, they tended to substitute themselves as the historical actor for the peasantry that they were fighting for. And so this idea of Jacobinism came along, where you'd have this disciplined leadership that governs the movement. It was most highly expressed in Nietzscheev. He's this populist, and he had this idea of like essentially putting subordinates, the leadership of the movement, putting their subordinates through the meat grinder to achieve their goals. And so that those are the kind of ideas that combine to create Leninist vanguardism.
Yeah, and there was some pushback against what is to be done too. I won't go too far into it, but you had your classic figures like it was obviously the Mensheviks, Trotsky at one point, who was at the time between sort of the Bolsheviks, the Mensheviks, and Plekhanov,
Right.
who highly influenced Lenin, which maybe we can talk about that on another podcast. But yeah, this I think it's a pretty good description.
Yeah.
Now I guess we can talk about. Do you think that the split is important for this conversation, or
the split? Could you be a little bit more explicit?
The Second International of
the revisionism controversy.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe to some extent. Definitely, you can definitely say what you want to say about it, and then I'll add what I think is important.
I was going to say I think it's important to understand the revisionism and Second International because this is sort of like another key factor. I am going to be a little abstract here because I don't have notes in front of me, but this is a key factor in the theoretical place of vanguardism, or should I say volunteerism and determinism. Luxembourg split or left, or should I say broke away from the Kautskian order when regarding the revisionism she saw within the Second International and Lenin later on. And a lot of it had to do with, Lenin represents this volunteeristic, we need a party early on, and
Right.
This, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because that is the fight. That is the fight of, the determinists believe that due to the contradictions of capitalism itself, that the workers alone can come to the conclusion that, capitalism needs to be sublated and replaced with its opposite, socialism. Well, Lenin would say no. While that does have a factor, you do need a communist party in order to lead the masses, which
Right.
As you brought up before, after or around 1905 and on, Lenin took his development to a new level, and in my mind, with a complete break from his old self when he studied Hegel.
Right.
When he, in his unpublished philosophical notebooks, he basically took the he fetishized practice of the workers, they themselves, they are not a key to socialism. They are socialism itself, moving toward their goal.
Right.
Like a radical fucking break from his former self, which a lot of people just don't know or reject outright, thinking that somehow his older theoretical ideas are the same as his later ones, which is inconsistent.
Right.
But it is definitely not controversial that he definitely was not a vanguardist by later in his life. So that's pretty much why I wanted to bring up the revisionism. There was also some other things, but I don't think it's quite related to the vanguardism.
Right. Yeah. I think So the issue for me when it comes to revisionism is that in terms of the way things turned out with the Russian Revolution, and in terms of how the Russian Revolution would be a model for, let's say, the communists in China, or I don't know, the Mongolian communists. They would eventually become communists, but or how the Soviet Union would be going forward, or communists in Cuba, or how whatever examples you want to use, maybe even the Hungarian communists. In terms of that, what ended up happening was, especially if you want to go back to 1903 with What Is to Be Done, where Lenin is trying to argue with the revisionists. And by the way, just to give you an idea what the revisionists were, basically a thinker called Bernstein from the SPD, the German Social Democratic Party, which was the kind of hub of the movement. He basically said, well, since we're already doing this kind of electoral strategy of national political parties running in elections, maybe that's all we need to do. Maybe there doesn't need to be a workers' insurrection at any point.
They call themselves evolutionists, not revolution.
Yeah, evolutionary socialism was like the English title of Bernstein's translated work on the subject. The original title in German translated to something like The Problems of Social Democracy or something like that.
Yeah, and a lot of those individuals came to be future members of the National Socialist Party of Germany.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Basically Lenin tried to address that in What Is to Be Done, but the thing is that the way he addresses it in What Is to Be Done, and the way in which the Bolshevik regime ends up being, is it just kind of ends up being, well, Bernstein is wrong for thinking that we can just do this electorally. We need an insurrection. But ultimately, the agreement on foundational strategy isn't, there's a foundational agreement about strategy, in the sense that the strategy is still a two-step strategy of the party taking control of the state. It's just a matter of whether you're doing that through elections or whether you're doing that through insurrection. Now, during the revolution, Lenin's ideas would be very different than that. But the way that the Bolsheviks ended up governing, and what Lenin was saying in What Is to Be Done, when he was trying to argue against the revisionists and their counterparts in Russia, who were called the legal Marxists, that basically ends up being the substance of the argument, and the disagreement is not actually that profound. And
I guess if you're gonna go, further in, where the Vanguard Party becomes less and less credible, is the February Revolution and onward.
Right.
Now, because the Soviets, I guess I'm going to introduce them. The Soviets were the worker councils of Russia, to put it very bluntly, and they organized themselves as a dual power system against the power at the time in Russia. And they did not need this, they did not need this outside governing boss to do so.
Right.
This was a revolutionary organization, and Lenin himself recognized this.
Yeah.
And to deny that, that it was of the workers' own spontaneous efforts for them to take matters in their own hands, is quite bluntly to deny history. I mean, even Trotsky noted this.
Yep. Yeah, the Soviets, and also the factory committees and the peasant uprisings via the peasant commune, those were basically kind of the striking blow, and their origin can be traced back to before the revolution, maybe from the 1905 revolution to 1907, when that basically subsided, maybe even a little bit earlier. There was this kind of organic break that the workers of Europe actually did with this social democratic kind of reformist model of electoral national parties, where they were essentially just carrying out their own rebellious actions, strikes and so forth. They were organizing themselves. So that kind of break with the kind of vanguardist model of tutelage of the workers, and especially with the reformism of the Second International, kind of ultimately develops into the 1917 Russian Revolution, where you have, as Will said, the Soviets, the factory committees, and also the soldiers' committees and the peasant commune. You have these structures of workers and peasants organizing themselves without this tutelage and certainly without this reformist bent. And so that kind of really throws a wrench in vanguardism, as it was put forward by the Second International, as it was put forward by the populists, and as it was put forward by Lenin in What Is to Be Done, to the point where the Bolsheviks, even their initial reaction to the Soviets was ambivalent. It was
it was like, if anything, there's evidence showing that Lenin was trying his best, in leadership to calm down, these councils, because he wanted to wait until everyone was united and stuff like that. But they wanted action,
right?
Yeah, and and action that they got, and the point of mentioning this history is to go over why did things like why did the German Revolution fail? Why did the party in Russia take over, even though was it because the Vanguard Party wasn't in charge? Well, no. It it ended because the revolution was choked in one part of the world.
Right.
Yeah. And there's this episode is already almost an hour, but I think we can already go over how this relates to the modern day.
Right.
Vanguards. We've had revolutionary situations before, after World War II, and I don't really see any Vanguard successes.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm sure that a lot of these individuals will say, well, what about fucking Cuba?
Right.
As if that's an answer, and not
Right.
just fetishizing a developing a state capitalist country,
right,
which had its problems being separated from the masses.
Right.
The Vanguard had no France, France and their revolution, I believe somewhere in the 1960s.
Yeah, 1968.
Yeah, the Vanguard Party. Where was the Vanguard Party then? I wonder.
Yeah, that's actually kind of important that you bring up 1968, because 1968 was another kind of crisis with this idea of kind of leadership, tutelage, and control of movements.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that the Soviets and the Russian Revolution and the independent workers' actions around the time of the 1905 revolution and the early decade of the 20th century, those are kind of previews of what would happen in 1968, where after these leaderships had taken state power everywhere, the Soviet Union was established. The PRC was People's Republic of China was established.
Mm-hmm.
The North, the Korean War had happened, and you had the North Korean regime, the Socialist Republic of Yugoslavia. You can go on and on. But so, after you had, and also you had communist parties actually kind of duplicating what the Second International did with running in elections. That led to something called Euro communism, which is basically just like a retread of Bernstein revisionism.
Yeah.
And so after you had kind of these leaderships taking state power via insurrection, via elections, fighting fascism in World War II, in 1968, you had this rebellion against U.S. geopolitical power because the U.S. was what you would call a hegemon at that time. It basically, on the international scene, politically and economically, it got its way 95% of the time.
Yeah.
And so there's these big upheavals around the year 1968, and they reverberate to the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that are challenging the world system under U.S. leadership, and they also end up challenging the established left with these communist and socialist parties in power in government, saying, you the leaderships of the old left, you've just become integrated into capitalism. You've become a part of the capitalist world order, and you've lost whatever radical inclinations you had originally. And so that is this kind of giant break again with the idea of the Vanguard Party and control of the movement by central leadership and tutelage by intellectuals. So that becomes a big break with those ideas on a huge scale in 1968, going all the way to the collapse of the Soviet Union.
I get, before we even get to that, like when the death of Stalin, when Stalin died, whatever that sparked, like for instance in the Hungarian Revolution, something that was spontaneous, that had worker councils, it was rebelling against the state capitalist regime of the USSR, to me that was a form of success. And the reason why it didn't succeed is because, once again, you cannot have it in one country. It's gonna degenerate into something to its opposite and become a capitalist country again, with no worker power. And the reason why I bring up 1968, even Occupy, all of these things, is because when you really study where the climate of the climate of these proto revolutions or struggles, the Vanguard Party is nowhere to be found.
Right.
They have no control. And my main criticism of the Vanguard Party right now, without appealing to some theorists, just through observation and history, is that the Vanguard Party never has enough connection with the working class or any type of lead to effectively lead anyone. They are always left in the dust.
Right.
I mean, that's as simple as that. Your Vanguard Party is reactionary and is counter-revolutionary because the working class will always be ahead of it by like miles.
Right. Yeah.
I don't really. It's as simple as that.
Right.
Yeah. Like, if you cannot, adjust your strategy to the historic, context to where we're in, You know, we're no longer, you know, we're not in a peasant dominated society anymore where vanguards, you know, easily could have taken over.
Right.
Yeah, because, you know, we live in a world where workers are, you know, more intelligent than they've ever been in history, where they're more conscious of the world, and you know, you're going to have to adjust for that.
Yeah.
And vanguardism is outdated and wasn't, you know, it was only revolutionary in the context it was used, and at that, it was barely used at all.
Right. Yeah.
That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement. I think to add to that, what you might call as one of the first failures of vanguardism was the Russian populace to the people movement. This is basically where a bunch of Russian populists by the thousands went to the countryside, to the peasants that they were fighting for. Now, there wasn't a unified idea that they should be trying to lead the peasants when they were doing this. Some of them just wanted to, learn from the peasants. But ultimately, the idea was, regardless, that the populists had to go to the masses rather than the masses had to take up political action for themselves. And the result of this was that the peasants found the populace very condescending, very strange, and sometimes they even reported the populace to the police. So the project completely, fell in on itself. It collapsed, and the authorities dispersed it, and it was this giant defeat for populism. And as a result of that, Russian populism went into this period of just kind of terrorist violence that ultimately ended up in the death of the more modernizing liberal czar Alexander II, and his replacement by his extremely reactionary son Alexander III. And that basically ended any kind of liberal reform for Tsarist Russia.
Yeah. I forgot we had a chat.
Yeah.
I do have to go soon, and
Right.
I wasn't as well prepared for this as I should have been.
I think you did a good job.
Oh, thanks. I'll be way more prepared for the next one, which I'll plan out.
Right.
Also, let's see here. Dear God, go out and organize. Organize what? What? I don't entirely understand what you want me to do. You mean to organize a board game? I don't entirely know.
Yeah, my
for
response,
a revolution.
Yeah,
I don't.
My response was, yeah, I'm not of the just go out and organize mind. You need to actually think about the issues that you should be organized around first.
And I do organize for things like Black Lives Matter and the feminist movements that are close by, and I do write about these things. So it's not like I'm ignoring them. Who won? I did. Organize a body without organs. What counts as success? Not ending up in state capitalism.
Yeah. Organized I just saw that. Yeah. Vanguardism and its relation to the two-step strategy. Yeah, that's basically what we were talking about.
Yeah. I don't know. A lot. In my mind, it's just that a lot of these, vanguardists they don't pay attention to, what the modern climate is, the historic nature of today's working class. And, what they'll do is they'll write about oh, here are the problems. They need a party. And it's not even just, the vanguardists. It's also the left communists, Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, Emerald. If the workers need a party, they'll form it themselves. Through their own, experience through the struggles against capitalism and for freedom.
Right.
But
I think when a lot of left sects say, well, we need to form the party, what they really mean is, us, the left sect, we need to do things. We need to
know
push
what's
history.
best.
We need to push history along, and it's just the entire edifice of that idea is just, as we've been detailing, just kind of nonsense.
Yeah, like it's just not much else to say. I don't really got much time, but I feel like next time we can talk about that book you read on the party.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah. Where are the masses? I don't like you outside your house. Like, I don't know what to say to that.
Yeah, I mean, just the masses are regular people. I don't, they are
you
the majority of people that live in the contemporary world?
Are you talking about the international women's movements that's going on around the world? Are you talking about the the worldwide quest for Black liberation? Are you talking about the multiple strikes for basically decent human rights under the COVID crisis? You gotta be specific. There's a lot of mass movements going on right now. If you're referring to any one of those, we can talk about it. Or if you're trying to gotcha me into saying that there's where the masses are, dude, read the news.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be centered around a communist banner in order to be a struggle for freedom in some way or another.
Right.
Which is
I agree.
I'm waiting for more chat stuff. I guess not.
Yeah.
Definitely the next episode will be a little bit more prepared.
Yeah. I mean, you did a pretty good job this time, I think. So.
Yeah. Working off of books I've read months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll have another episode out as soon as we can. Do you have anything you want to plug?
Check out newsandletterscommittee.com. They have a lot of good shit.
I'll put a link in the description later when this uploads.
Yeah. Thank y'all for watching.
Yep. Thanks.